How much does the former undisputed, unified light welterweight champion of the world, Josh the Tartan Tornado Taylor, have left? This is the question that I'm going to try and answer in today's video. Taylor has been one of the most exceptional talents to come out of the UK in recent times. With his fierce and ferocious style, high punch output, fearlessness in the ring, and overall love of a war, Taylor is undoubtedly a special fighter. But over the last few years, things haven't gone quite so well for Josh. He's suffered back-to-back defeats, he's no longer a world champion, and with him about to endeavour in a career up at the 147-pound division, I felt now would be the perfect time to analyse and assess just why Josh Taylor has gone through such a difficult period in his life. Stick with me to the end of this one, guys, as I'm going to get into all the details around this, give it full context, and try to explain to you why Josh Taylor might have just a bit more left than you think. Hello everyone, and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. I am delighted to be talking about Josh Taylor today because you'll have noticed I have turned the background blue. We had to do it because it's a Scottish fighter, and for those of you that don't know, I grew up in Scotland. I spent the majority of my adult life, my young life, in Scotland. I actually grew up and my family lived like maybe 40 minutes from Josh Taylor, where Josh Taylor lives. So he's always been the home fighter for me, even though I have this English accent. He is the guy that I've kind of followed pretty closely, and I have absolutely loved every bit of Josh Taylor's career. Not the losses so much, but I've always said that Dave Allen now is probably the last fighter I support. I still have a big feeling towards Josh being that flag bearer for Scotland on the boxing scene, and also just the way that he goes about his business. Even if I had never set foot in Scotland, I would have absolutely loved watching Josh Taylor because he was brilliant and is brilliant to watch. But there's a genuine debate and discussion to be had here because Josh Taylor hasn't clearly won a fight in about 4 years now. He did have that win against Jack Catterall in their first fight, but whether or not you think he won, whether or not you think it was a robbery, it was definitely a very, very close call, and that was why so many people called robbery, because it was, it was an arguable outcome. Lots of people thought that Josh Taylor probably shouldn't have got it, and so his last win was really when he beat Jose Ramirez, his last clear win. And with that in mind, we really need to take a look at what Taylor's got left, because as I say, he's about to move to welterweight, he's got this fight coming up, and we need to try and understand whether or not he can go and have a good run at welterweight, because I thought he should have done this quite a long time ago, or at the very least, I wanted to see it quite a long time ago, because welterweight's always been quite an exciting division. But right now, there's big opportunities in that division, and so I really want to think about how could a fit and firing Josh Taylor fit into that welterweight scene, and can he be that guy again? Guys, before I get into this one, don't forget to bang a like on the video if indeed you do like it. Don't forget to subscribe to A Guy Called Henry if you're new, and get your comments in the comments section below. Do you think Josh Taylor can become a world champion at 147 pounds? Also, I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for those of you that have watched the Kell Brook documentary, given it good feedback. It was a big piece. It was a lot of effort. I'd like to ideally try and do one of those every couple of months because I love the idea of having more evergreen content on the channel. And if you do want to support me in building this channel up, consider becoming a member. There's a link in the description for that. And if you want to work with me as a video content creator, I support businesses with exciting social content, website videos, all that stuff. My website is also in the description. Now, just to give context to just how great Josh Taylor is, for those of us that need reminding, this is a guy that as an amateur won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games and was world champion at 140 pounds within 14 fights. And then again, in 17 fights, he's gone on to become the undisputed unified champion. Do you know how insane that is? Do you know how incredible that is to do it in that few fights? In the style he did it in as well. He fought all the guys in the division that were holding belts. There were no vacant belts. There was no easy touches. This was a guy that was forced to do it the hard way. And he did it with great style in great fashion as well. I'll never forget watching that O'Hara Davies fight. And this is actually a lesson to a lot of promoters out there that don't invest in the talents that they have. But I remember when he was with Cyclone at the time, under Barry McGuigan, training with Shane McGuigan, I remember they quite considerably overpaid to get O'Hara Davies up to Scotland to fight Josh Taylor. But such was the confidence they had in their man. He absolutely destroyed O'Hara Davies in this fight. O'Hara Davies at the time had been built up quite a bit. He'd been on Sky a lot. He was under Eddie Hearn. And they took the fight because of how much Cyclone were willing to pay O'Hara Davies to go up there and fight Josh Taylor. And Josh Taylor took that opportunity with both hands. I mean, it was a remarkable performance at the time. I mean, not in terms of the fact that Taylor wasn't so much more talented than Davies, but just because it gave context to just how good Taylor was. Truly sensational performance. I recommend you go and watch that fight if you haven't done so. It was very, very fun. And when Josh Taylor was at his best, going through the 140-pound division, beating the likes of Baranchik, Regis Prograis, Victor Postal, and of course, Jose Ramirez, what characterized his style was absolute front foot aggression, high punch output, but there was a lot of skill and technique to it as well. And when you watch that O'Hara Davies fight in particular, you'll notice what a good counterpuncher he was. But no matter what happened in the fight, his chin always held up and he was always ready for a war. And that Regis Prograis fight, I remember that was an absolute war. That was terrifying, the amount of punches both men took in that fight. It was very close. I remember how badly Taylor's eye swelled up in that fight, but it was amazing. It was such a spectacle. Such a good fighter, and weird to watch in a way because he was really more of an inside fighter. That was kind of where he did his best work, despite being very tall the way. I think he's like 5'11". I've met him in person a couple of times, and I think he's like 5'11", maybe 6 foot even. He's a tall guy. So him making 140 pounds and was always a bit of a miracle to me in the first place, but also, like I say, his style really being more of an inside fighter was very interesting. But he could also box on the back foot. And he was very good at moving on the back foot, moving in a clockwise direction, and using that catch and throw with that lead right hook. Also, a bit of a switcher as well. Often would find himself in orthodox, using that as a technique to stay close to his man, keep his front foot close, cut the ring off. Just overall, a fantastic, very, very good fighter. Good jab too, super sharp, feints. And for a while, for me, he was pound for pound the best coming out of the UK for sure. And I think he was ranked top sort of 5 pound for pound in the world for a while as well. And that is something that is difficult to do as well. When you're from a small country like Scotland, of course, the fans are incredibly passionate and diehard. They will travel with you. But there's just not as many people in the country to be a fan of him. And with England and Scotland with the relationship being the way it is, you're never going to get loads and loads of English going and supporting Josh Taylor. Especially because Josh as well himself, like he'll be the first to say F the English, and rightly so. So I guess what I want to do right now is get into this video and sort of analyze what happened to Taylor. Why was he at the top, and then why did he start to decline? I suppose the best place to go, in the first place to go, is 4 years ago when he beat Jose Ramirez. He's come off a great run. And what I should say is just before this fight, he had a fight against a guy called Apanan Kongsong. I was actually at the press conference for that. It was in Glasgow, and it was right before COVID struck. And he just left Shane McGuigan. This was going to be his first fight under new trainer, Ben Davison. And I do think that leaving Shane might have been... I mean, I don't know if it was a mistake on a personal level, on a promotional level, because obviously Cyclone, a lot of fighters have had their issues with that management outfit, but promotional outfit. But in terms of just like purely talking from a training aspect, I think that Shane was a great fit for Josh. And how fast he moved through the pro ranks, how fast he developed that pro style, Shane was obviously very, very good for Josh. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think Josh would deny that himself. They achieved a lot together. And Josh probably never looked better than when he was with Shane McGuigan. And even in that Jose Ramirez win, when he unified the division, I do remember thinking that I'd seen better Josh Taylors than that. And even though he fought extremely well, it was a more methodical display. It was more of a counter-punching display. He displayed a bit more single-shot power in that fight. Nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't as ferocious as I'd seen Josh Taylor. And I definitely felt there was a little bit more of that analytical Ben Davison style on the performance. And again, nothing wrong with that. It was just a little bit different. And probably at the highest level, something that might have been necessary for him to win that fight. And I guess this is really where things became difficult. You know, he had the Jose Ramirez win. I'm pretty sure it was a COVID fight, so I don't think there was a crowd for it, or it was a small crowd for it anyway. And Josh then throughout this period undergoes a real difficult time. You know, he had a lot of injuries. I remember in particular, I actually did a bit of filming on his BBC documentary that was made, and I remember seeing him at the time, and his knee was all swollen up, and it was absolutely messed up, to be honest, and to be fair with you. He wasn't training at the time. And as I say, being a naturally big dude, long periods without fighting would have been massively difficult for him. Josh was someone who was fighting regularly. You know, he was fighting 2 or 3 times a year. He had great activity, helps to keep the weight down, keeps him in the gym, and just keeps him sharp and focused. And, you know, you hear fighters often talking about losing that sharpness when they spend long periods of time out of the ring. And I guess just to give you context, I'll just take you through his box rec quickly. So in 2017, he had 4 fights. 2018, he had 3 fights. 2019, he had the Baranchik and then Prograis fights. 2020, he only has that 1 fight against Kongsong, and that's at the end of 2020. So at that point, he's had a year out of the ring. Kongsong really wasn't a good opposition for him. So again, did he really get much from that fight in terms of sharpness and whatnot? I'd say no. And then from there, he's got almost a year out to fight Jose Ramirez. And then after that, I think he enjoyed himself, I'll be honest with you. I think he was out, you know, doing all sorts of stuff. And then he came back in 2022. It was around 10 months later, sorry. And that was the first fight against Jack Catterall, which we should talk about because this is when there's more context to add. Yes, there'd been inactivity. Yes, there'd been injuries. But in Jack Catterall, he was coming up against somebody who knew he was going to be fighting Josh Taylor for a very long time because he took step-aside money so that Josh could go and unify the division so that Josh could retain that belt. And so for a really long period, Catterall was only working for that Taylor fight. And now, for some fighters, that wouldn't make too much difference because they just aren't good style matchups for their opponent. You know, it doesn't matter how much preparation they do, they're just never going to have the style to beat that guy. But not only did Catterall have a long period of preparation, but also it has to be said that Catterall had the right style to beat Josh Taylor. a fellow southpaw for one, which is always tricky to come up against when, you're used to fighting orthodox fighters as a southpaw. You lose some of the advantages that being a southpaw affords you. But also Catterall he's basically a pure counterpuncher. That is his style. He's a spoiler. He lets you come to him and then he fires off sharp, aggressive counters. And I do think that Josh took that for granted a little bit in fight one. Now, being with someone like Ben Davison, you find that sort of somewhat surprising. You think they're being as analytical as they are as a team. So I would say that also it was just the intense preparation time that Catterall had for that played into it. And the fact that Josh was trying to get back down to 140 after this long injury layoff, these periods where he's gone up in weight quite a bit more because he can't train the same. It's going to be harder. It's going to be more difficult. So yeah, there's reasons and there's excuses as to why he couldn't necessarily perform to his level. And Catterall's had that preparation time. Overall, it's just a recipe for disaster for Taylor. And also, we just have to say that styles aside, preparation aside for Taylor, Catterall is a genuinely world-level fighter. But Josh did get the win here, and it was a big controversial moment in his career. Most people thought that Catterall won the fight. It was close, but to be fair, I think it was pretty easy to score it for Jack Catterall. That is what I will say. And since this point, Josh Taylor hasn't officially won a fight. So this was in February 2022. So we're talking over 3 years ago. There's not an official win on his record in this time. It was the only time Taylor fought in 2022. And then he's out the ring for, 16 months before he has his next fight. He's still world champion at this point, but he's been stripped of most of his other belts in this period. And I believe there was more injuries in this time. I think he was supposed to have the rematch with Catterall. I think Catterall then got his own injury and had to pull out. So I think Josh then pulled out himself because I think the opportunity to fight one Teofimo Lopez came up, basically. And again, we got to give this context. I thought that Josh Taylor in the first few rounds of that fight looked really, really good. Up until around 4-5, I thought Taylor was very, very competitive. And I thought I had him slightly ahead at that point in the fight. But again, there's context here. Taylor's been out the ring for a long time. He's rusty. He's not got the fitness. He's not got the sharpness. But also, again, he's in there in a fighter in Teofimo Lopez, who I think might be the best in-the-pocket fighter in the world right now. I think this guy is ridiculous. The athleticism that he has, the raw ability he has, the defensive work he's able to do. He's not a normal fighter. This guy is pound for pound, in my opinion. And he's powerful as well. He's strong. He's probably a slightly bigger single puncher in terms of power than Josh Taylor is. And so in Catterall, in Lopez, not only is he the worst prepared he's ever been going into two fights in terms of his fitness and his conditioning, making that 140 limit, but also he's fought two guys who I'd say stylistically are about as hard as it can get for him. So it's been a bit of a disaster period. And then he goes back in for the rematch against Catterall. And even though I'd say this one was actually closer and more competitive, arguably, he loses this one via unanimous decision. And again, he spent another 13 months out of the ring. So the argument here is really, has it just been an unfortunate period for Josh Taylor? And has he just fought the wrong kind of opponents? I think there's a bit of truth to both, to be honest with you. Injuries and inactivity don't help any fighter, and he's definitely suffered that the last few years. And he moved so fast in his career, it's not surprising that, when he finally stopped for a little bit to enjoy himself, he kind of got into a bit of trouble. And I'd say that it was around this time, I think after the victory, after that first fight, against Jack Catterall, where arguably he lost, that was the time, in my opinion, to go to 147 pounds. Because the thing is, he's not young anymore. He's in his early 30s. And he said he could still make 140, but realistically, with the lifestyle he was living at the time, with the weight injuries had taken their toll, I think it would have been safer to return at 147. Maybe you even go back to 140 after a couple of fights at 147, but the weight was harder than ever for him to make. I don't think that's in question. And so looking ahead now he actually is at 147. What do I think he can do? Well, I think the most important thing is for him to fight a couple of times in the next year. I think he needs to put a string of performances together where you go, yep, he looks good at 147. He's fit again. He's in shape. He's got the engine back fully. His sharpness is back fully. His timing's back fully. I think those are the most important factors for Josh Taylor. I also think confidence will be a factor. He seems like a pretty fiery, confident guy, but I think he needs to be in there with someone who isn't as much of a defensive problem for him to try and work out. And I think in the guy he's fighting this weekend, Ekow Essuman, I think that we have that. Essuman, I've watched a little bit of him. I've studied a couple of his fights briefly before this video. To me, he's not a counterpuncher in style traditionally. He might come into this fight and try to counterpunch, but he's someone who's not been at world level, I'll say that. He's got a loss against Harry Scarf, who I actually think is a very, very underrated welterweight. And he's not a massive puncher, although he did score a beautiful TKO win a couple of fights ago against Owen Cooper. But as I say, he's never been at world level. Stylistically, I don't think he is the kind of style that would traditionally be able to beat Josh Taylor. High punch output, but he does square up quite a bit. He doesn't really get his head off the line loads. I think he's there for Josh Taylor to make Josh Taylor look really good. Although it will be hard because Josh Taylor, for the first time in his career, is up at 147. The guy is going to be probably a bit bigger and stronger than some of the guys he fought at 140. I think that Frank Warren as he always does, and usually does, sorry, I should say, has done a terrific job in the matchmaking here. I think this can make Taylor look really, really good, give him his confidence, and then let's get him through a couple of camps now at 147, get him fit and firing, get him sharp, and then see what he can do in this division. Because honestly, there's only one champion who I see as really, really formidable at 147, and that is Jerome Boots Ennis. I do believe all the other guys are not the strongest champions we've seen. And I think if Taylor can show a bit of form and a bit of fitness at 147 pounds, there's a chance he could become a two-time two-weight world champion. I think that is entirely possible. Really what I want to see in this fight is a terrific performance from Josh Taylor. I don't doubt he's got it in him still. I think it's there. I think he'll be as hungry as ever. It's just in his nature. It's the character he is. I can't think that the fire's gone, but if it has, then it's probably time to call it a day. And we're going to find out against Essuman because he'll be there to be hit. He'll be there to have a scrap with. And we'll find out if that fiery Scotsman in Josh Taylor is still there. But guys, let me know what you think. Do you think Josh Taylor could still become a world champion again? Do you think he's still got the desire? Do you still think he's got the motivation? Do you think he's good enough to win a world title at 147 pounds? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're new. Do consider becoming a member. Links for that, working with me, all that stuff, it's in the description. I'm going to probably do a live stream for this one. It requires me to get up early, but you know what? I'm not a very fun person these days, so I don't think I'm going to be doing anything Saturday night. So Sunday morning for me in Australia will be when it's on. So I'm going to try and get up and live stream it. I'm looking forward to that. And as I always say, on to the next one.